Hey everybody, Tony D. Little Jones asleep on the couch. She's had so much steak tonight. It's like 3 days of steak for that little dog. I did want to do a real rundown of Biden's speech and what I thought about it. As you can imagine, I thought it was an absolute disaster. Um, I mean, you saw it if you watched the full length version of Biden reacts to Biden. He actually said he spent 120 years in office and didn't correct himself. Just didn't correct himself. Just kept going. Now, he made some other mistakes with numbers, as he often does, and corrected himself. He said 100,000 when he meant 1,000. Uh, and again, that was a big mistake, too, because he was talking about the number of migrant children he was moving out of the facility into I believe Fort, whatever the fort was, I forget the name, and he said 100,000 by mistake, and then corrected himself and said 1,000. That's a pretty big difference. He also, but the biggest flub was when he just trailed off to nothing. Now, I'd already watched a lot of commentary about it, so I was expecting it. But even I was a little shocked when I actually saw it. Like, wow, man, he just lost his train of thought and just said, "F it, I'm not going back." I'm not even sure what he was trying to say. I think when that happens, people are like internalizing, their dialogue, and I think he's just lost in it. I will say, when he was lucid, he was really lucid. He was more lucid than I had seen him in a while, because it seems like he does these speeches and he's lost almost from the moment he starts. He's exhausted. You know, he's not sharp at all. At least he was sharp in some moments. But you could even see the reporters. Man, I don't know how these people sleep at night. I really don't. It was like they were caretakers in a nursing home trying to talk to one of the residents, and they were being extra careful. All except one woman reporter who seemed a bit sassy. But even her questions weren't. She seemed more impatient than anything else. It wasn't like anyone was really grilling him on anything, especially the male reporters. Man, you want to talk about guys, some of the wimpiest soy boys I've ever seen. Like, well, Mr. President, if I could just ask you this question that I'm about to say. I mean, it was just that bad. It was like, if I could lower my voice anymore, just let me know. I mean, it's bad. He's out of whack, man. He needs to retire before he either, quite frankly, he could just die. I mean, he really could. He just seems very fragile when he starts to lose it. Although, again, today he seemed strong in a few moments, especially right in the beginning. He seemed to get his energy up, but, in the middle of it, man, it was like watching, a grandparent or, somebody older. Just, you know, they're not that bad yet, but they shouldn't be in charge of the country. No way. And hearing him talk about China, not great. Not great. Very muddled. Not really a strong message to China. Wasn't very clear on whether or not he'll do anything. And same thing with North Korea, really. Just constant blaming of Trump. My God. How many times are you going to blame the previous guy, Biden? Jesus. Even if you were lucid, that was way too many times to blame Trump, especially for the migrant crisis. That is 100% you, man. 100%. The cages were built during the Obama administration, which you were a part of. You were a major part of. And To say that, well, Trump dismantled everything and, everything he did was wrong and bad, that's just not true. I mean, there were just outright lies in this speech. Trump's immigration policy worked. It kept people from coming here at all, which meant he could close some of those facilities. The reason you need them is because, like a moron, you got on international TV and said, hey, everybody, come on down. Or come on up, I should say. And now you've got a real problem on your hands. You're begging people not to come in the country. You're trying to get Mexico to do something when Trump had a system in place that worked. There's no reason for asylum seekers to come here when there's a bunch of other countries in between that are perfectly viable for asylum seekers. For the non-asylum seekers, for essentially guys who just want to come across the border and work, but they're not, they're doing it illegally, those guys need to be stopped. They need to be stopped and sent home. They have to do it the legal way. And there's legal ways for them to do it, but they won't do it because part of the reason they won't do it is it involves a bunch of money and paperwork and bureaucracy that they may get turned down. They may make the journey all the way, do all this work, and still say no. And they'll still get fleeced along the way. The Mexican government is pretty corrupt, so I assume they're going to be pretty corrupt at the border. They're still going to have to pay some bribes. The coyotes are dangerous, but in some respects more reliable, because once you pay them, they're going to bring you across. Now, if you're a grown adult, or at least someone who can take care of themselves, you'll probably be okay. But if you're a woman or a kid or a family, I mean, they got you. They got you. And this whole thing with the kids, man, you are effing that up. You are effing it up. And you come out in this speech and blame Trump all day long, ain't gonna work. Not even his ardent critics believe that Trump messed up the border. The one thing he did was the border. That's all he ever talked about. We're gonna build a wall. He got Mexico, of all countries, he got them to patrol the border on the other side. That cost you nothing. And you told them to stop, essentially. This pathetic, we have to undo everything Trump did, has cost you now. And no one believes you. And then you made matters worse by saying, well, according to all the polls, you mean the polls that lie to us every day? I mean, they cooked the books before, but now it's just sad. Now we're reaching Banana Republic levels of polling when you have 60% approval. Oh, okay. Tell me again how great your polls are. Tell me again about how many Republican voters you actually talk to. You're not talking to anybody, Biden. You can't go out of the house. A stiff breeze knocks you over. You're telling me, oh, well, the Republicans I talk to, the real voters. Who? You're not talking to anybody. Wait, come on. Come on, man. I don't think anybody's buying that for a second. I mean, at least if you had said, well, I've talked to some of the Republicans in Congress, you could say, hey, he's been in government for 47 years. He's probably talked to these guys, and that's a reasonable assertion. The idea that you're out on the streets talking to Republican voters, no way. You haven't talked to a voter. I mean, every time we saw you talk to a voter on the campaign trail, you got into an argument, or you insulted them, or you challenged them to a push-up contest. But you talk to Republicans who are totally on your side. Yeah. That sounds totally plausible, crazy old man. So yeah, this speech was bad, and I understand. I was going to do a live stream, but it was on. It was on the day I was at work, and I was on the phone. I'm like, ah, crap! It's already started. So I understand why they did that, because maybe fewer people saw it, especially people who work for a living, the kind of people who aren't voting for Biden anymore. The amazing part, of course, and this part I think was totally 100% sincere. You got a glimpse into the mind of Democrats and how they think the economy works. So at one point he says, this country was built by the middle class, and the middle class was built by unions. Or no, something like the middle class was built by good jobs, and the good jobs came from unions. So that's how he sees it all. He sees it as the government creates these jobs, and then the unions help these people make money, and then magically we have a huge tax base that Democrats can keep pulling money out of to keep doing it more and more and more. That's, I mean, he seemed to think that was actually true. And the math just doesn't work out on that, especially now. Taxes are way too high. Unions are mostly corrupt, especially the bigger ones. You get into, if you're lucky enough to get into a union, yeah, you have all these protections, but you may not have the hours. You have to fight for the hours. And then once you start qualifying for the hours, first you have to get a minimum amount to get your benefits. But then if you want to take days off, you have to worry about that, because you can't take too many days off, because then you get demoted, and then other guys who work more get the better shifts, and part of it's seniority. So you have these older guys there who are, you really can't fire them. And I have a friend who's in a very big union. I won't say which one, but he tells me all these stories. They've got guys who make insane amounts of money. All they do is work. They just work nonstop. They work like 12 hours because they can, and they're getting paid insane amounts of money. But they don't have a life. That's all they do. They just work and stack up money. And first off, that's not much of a life. Second off, the money's being concentrated in certain people. And it's a different kind of hierarchy. This isn't a hierarchy of, say, billionaires or powerful people. It's a hierarchy of, well, I wouldn't say it's totally corruption, but of people who are taking advantage of the union system in order to stack the deck in their favor. They have the connections and the network, and they know the right people, and they're getting paid. Literally, guys are making, $1,500, $2,000 a night for a few hours of work. Some of them. I'm not kidding. That's a crazy amount. I mean, imagine you can make that sort of money for a few hours of work this isn't like the 1920s where they're pulling ropes and lifting stuff physically. These guys are not doing a tremendous amount of work. They're doing some. I'm not trying to insult them, and I'm trying to keep this very vague so I don't give away what unions I'm talking about, but the insane amount of money they make, and they work so hard to get to that position, they never want to let it go. These guys are a lot like the guys in Congress who die in office. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is in her 80s. Joe Biden's falling apart, and Dianne Feinstein supposedly is falling apart too. They don't want to leave. It's too comfortable. It's too much money. They're too powerful. They know nothing else. And I think this mirrors the union situation. So that's where the Democrats think all the money comes from. And really, at the end of the day, why are they doing this? Do they actually care about the working man? No. They care because the unions back the Democrats. And they're powerful organizations that funnel millions of dollars into their coffers so they can get elected. But the Republicans, at least during Trump, were the guys who created jobs. Biden destroyed jobs. He's got a lot of nerve talking about the unions and how great they are when he destroyed 10,000 jobs with a stroke of a pen the moment he got in office. There's a fact, I think I talked about this the other day. There's a factory in Pennsylvania. They're moving all the jobs to Mexico. Everybody voted for Biden. They're horrified. Anyone could have told you Biden was incredibly dishonest and corrupt. He's not bringing those jobs back. He's got pie in the sky. It's pie in the sky BS to think he's going to create a bunch of green jobs. Those jobs just don't appear. And okay, so imagine they're building a wind farm in South Jersey here, right? So imagine, okay, they're all going to be unionized. So, obviously these guys probably have a loading dock, right? Once the place is built up, you're not going to really use it that much. Maybe you use it for, parts and whatnot. It's just mainly maintenance at some point. But, they're going to have union guys there who at first will probably work pretty hard as they build the place. But then once the place is built, what are you going to use the loading dock for? A few things. Again, maintenance here and there, but mostly they'll just be sitting around. But they'll be union. You'll never get rid of them. And then, you'll have guys working in the energy industry there to maintain and monitor the wind farm. What are they needed for? I guess repair, climbing all the way up there, making sure the turbines are working and monitoring. But unless the stuff breaks, they're just there. And that's not a tremendous amount of jobs. And really, when you're talking about an energy company, they're probably going to have tons of money. So at some point, some of those jobs will go away. They'll be able to roll it back to a reasonable level and make more money. They're not going to have 2,000 employees for a wind farm, right? I don't think so, unless the whole wind farm is constantly falling apart. So, this idea of green jobs, there's just not going to be that many. The whole point of these green initiatives is to have less of a carbon footprint. A field of solar panels doesn't need a lot of maintenance once it's built. It just needs to be monitored and upkept. It doesn't need the amount of people who built it. It needs, I don't know, depending on the size, it needs maybe a dozen people. Keep things going, to replace a panel here and there, to monitor the energy output. They built a wind farm over a train station near me. How many people could they have running that? Not that many. Otherwise, they wouldn't have built it. If it needed 100 workers to operate, they couldn't afford the overhead. Obviously, they build it and kind of forget about it and just upkeep the damn thing. So I don't see where Biden gets off touting these green jobs like there's going to be millions of them. There's going to be way more jobs in drilling. Those guys are constantly doing stuff because you have to drill down, you have a lot of equipment and stuff to set up, but you don't just drill once, you drill a bunch of times. And the pipelines need to be maintained, and they're miles and miles and miles and miles long. They're not like a wind farm or a solar farm where they're going to be a finite space. So, Biden's pie in the sky rhetoric, it comes from the leftists who are really running the show. And, none of these reporters really called them out on anything. Not really. No one's calling him out for his cognitive decline. He just fell down up the stairs, down the stairs, up the stairs. He could have died. He could have died on that. We could have ended up witnessing his death if he had fallen backwards. If he had fallen backwards, he probably would have died. He's old enough that if he hits his head, man, it's over. And he's a tall guy too, so it was a long way. If he had gone backwards instead of forwards, man, I think he would have been done. He would have smashed his head right open. So he should not be walking up those stairs by himself. Quite frankly, he didn't need to. There's all kinds of people who travel with him. Why didn't somebody walk behind him? This is what these people do. They do not care about his safety. And, as much as I think he's a corrupt old man, I don't want to see him die. And again, all these people, I don't know why they just don't retire and go be with their grandkids and families in their final days and enjoy life. They have all the money in the world, but it's never enough. The greed consumes these people. They're consumed by it. What does Joe Biden need this for? He could have walked away, a beloved vice president during the time of Obama. Now, look at him. He's falling apart before our eyes. He gives this BS speech where he lies. The journalists are falling over themselves, kissing his butt. It's disgusting to watch. And I'm rapidly losing any sympathy I ever had for him. Rudy Giuliani, when he does his videos, and they're still being produced on Rumble, by the way, he talks about the Biden crime family. And one of the things he said multiple times is, Joe Biden is a terrible father. He's just a terrible person. The Bidens are corrupt. And really, I think that's true. They are very corrupt, and in my view too. So I think this was, another Biden train wreck. But as long as the media just pretends like he's doing well, even he might believe he's still a good president. It's sad.